Okay, wait now. Okay, sorry about that.
Okay. I'm so delighted to introduce Sue as our speaker here tonight, though I'm sure for many of us, Sue really needs no introduction. However, for anyone who has not been able to attend our past Zoom meetings, Sue gave us two wonderful presentations on the flora of Labrador, the first being the area south of Postville, then followed by the Churchill River Valley area pre-hydro development. I could not possibly list off Sue's many academic achievements and publications tonight, but to touch just briefly, Sue has an arts botany degree from Rutgers University, New Jersey, a master's of science botany from Eastern Illinois University, and she has achieved PhD status plant taxonomy from the University of Connecticut. She married fellow Newfoundlander and botanist Bill Meades, and the two make for quite a dynamic scientific duo. We were so lucky to have Sue living here for 17 years as a botanical consultant. She was instrumental in the establishment of the Burren Cape Ecological Reserve and the primary author of the annotated checklist of vascular plants of Newfoundland. Sue and Bill are the authors of one of our favorite go-to digital sites, Flora of Newfoundland and Labrador. She's a well-recognized botanical illustrator as well as a gifted photographer. I noticed one of her most recent publications was with Wildflower member Lois Bateman, Marsh Orchids of Canada, Long-Standing Mysteries Partially Solved for the Coup Bulletin in January 2023. I should add that Sue was adjunct professor at Algoma University, where she developed the Northern Ontario Plant Database. Sue was also the founding member of our Wildfire Society, and she was actually past president. We have been blessed that herself and Bill continue to spend many summers back here on the rock, exploring and recording our flora. And finally, I'd like to say, despite our somewhat reluctant transition to Zoom, Sue has been amazingly helpful in making the process easy, coming back here tonight a third time to give us, and I am sure, another fabulous presentation. Thanks, Sue.
Thank you. So you're muted?
Yeah, now I'm off. Yeah.
Perfect.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes, perfect.
Carmel,
Great.
I think you mentioned Lois Bateman. It was Richard Bateman's article. That's in press now.
Oh, okay. That's a different Bateman.
Bateman, yeah.
Maybe they're related.
I kind of doubt it.
I wondered how I got in there.
Ah.
Now, Karen, all I see is Lois's name.
No, if you share your screen, you're ready to share.
Let's see now.
Just one little comment while we're doing this.
Okay.
I noticed when I did the Christmas slideshow, and others have noticed as well, there seems to be about a 3-second lag in between voice and picture in these presentations. And
Yeah.
so I'm just going to make a general suggestion for tonight and for other people coming up in later talks. When you switch to a new slide, wait maybe 2-3 seconds at least before you start speaking, because that sort of syncs up the pictures and the voice. It's just how Zoom works.
Already got that worked out, John.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thanks, John.
you do,
Yeah.
but yeah. Okay, so lots
Yeah.
of people have been not doing that.
Karen, do I hit hide video panel to get rid of the pictures on the side?
I don't see the pictures on the side. Yes, we'll try that. Hide. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, there
Hide
we go.
video.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
I'm ready whenever you are.
We are ready and loving the first picture. So beautiful.
Okay. So Bill and I went here in 2012. This is more of a fill-in just because Bill couldn't give his talk. So this is something that I had in the background for years. We took a trip to Ireland, and then we had another extension of the trip over to Norway. That'll have to be another time. But this particular talk is going to focus on just the wildflowers and the plants that are naturalized in the roadways that may be introduced, but are still there. Now, when we did this trip, we went through a travel agency, and they asked us to tell them what we wanted to see, and we drove ourselves. We didn't want a driver. We drove ourselves, and they picked out all our B&Bs for us, and we were surprised that everywhere we went, there was another extraordinary botanical site. So it worked out really well for us. This is our itinerary. We landed in Dublin. Can you, everyone see the map? Okay.
It's good.
So we landed in Dublin, and then we drove over to Doolin, and we stayed there a couple of days. We went up to Galway, and we'll talk about the Four Winds next time. And then we went to Loughlin Lodge. Actually, we just stayed there for lunch. And then we went up to Ballyshannon and Cavangarden. Then we went up to the Giant's Causeway in the tip of Northern Ireland, and down to the dark Hedges, and then Belfast. And they had a fabulous botanic garden there, which I'll talk about next time I do a talk. And then back to Dublin and home, or I should say out to Norway. But that's the itinerary, and we'll cover just the wildflowers for this talk. Now, driving from Dublin to Doolin, we saw a lot of different things that were new to us, including castles, and there were a lot of cattle in the fields too. And also sheep. There were lots of different kinds of sheep. These particular ones are called Galway sheep. And here you can see the stone walls. There were stone walls everywhere. It was just amazing. Karen, I'll let me know if I'm going too fast, okay?
No, that's good so far. Thank you.
One of the things that we quickly discovered is there are no shoulders in Ireland. If you have to pull over, you're in trouble, because there's usually a stone wall on either side of you, or a bank. So it was kind of tricky driving at first. And I don't know if we ever got used to it. We had a few close calls driving on the wrong side of the road, but people honking at us straightened that out quick enough. There's another picture. You can see how windy the roads are, how narrow, and how the rock rolls are right close up to the road. And there's a tour bus coming up the hill. You can see there's only inches to spare on either side of him. So you have to be very careful driving. You can't go very fast because you never know who you're going to meet. This particular hill is one that we saw near Doolin, and it's called Corkscrew Hill. And we were there watching a bus come around it, and he had a hard time turning around that curve. But this is just an example of more of the winding roads. One of the cities that we passed through on the way to Doolin was called Lisdoonvarna. And I took this picture because I thought it was so interesting. They have a matchmaking festival. You see the signs here. There they have a festival every year just for matchmaking, which is kind of interesting. Okay, we got to Doolin, and driving on the road above the city, or above the community. This is what the area looks like. Yeah, it's a coastal area. And there's lots of farmland around, and it's just beautiful. Lots of rock walls too. And if you, no matter where you go, you're probably going to see some kind of wildlife. There are horses and cows and sheep just about everywhere. Where we were staying the first night, or after we left Dublin, this Irish donkey was in the field, and I looked up online, and apparently the Irish donkey is now well established in Ireland, but it originated, I think.
Here. Okay, quite a lag there. We just got the donkey. Yeah, the donkey just came. He's so cute.
Right. So
Sorry.
the Irish donkey is they think it originated from North Africa, from the Nubian wild ass, which is Equus africanus, and the Irish donkey is Equus asinus. And the donkeys were brought to Ireland and other countries in Europe as pack animals during the silk trade. So that's when they brought the spices around. Okay.
Quite.
Yeah.
Okay.
The house in the background there, or that's where we're staying. That's called O'Connor's Guest House. And what looks like a field in front of us there is actually a riverbank and a river down below the wall. But there were digitalis. That was the first thing we noticed. Foxglove is growing just everywhere around there in the wild, on the roadsides.
Okay. Okay.
And this is just one wall of the O'Connor's Guest House. I thought it was just such a beautiful little shot. They had these wonderful planters with pansies and nasturtiums around on the other wall. It was a great place to stay. They had great food, and they had these wonderful gardens.
Okay. Okay.
And one of the main plants that they had in their garden was this, it used to be called a hebe, but this is Veronica franciscana, and it's blue gem is the cultivar. It's got shorter, blunter leaves than most of the other hebes, but it's a beautiful shrub, and it was planted all around in many areas around that guest house.
Okay.
Another plant that was quite common in their gardens was Escallonia rubra. Common name is red Escallonia or red claws. And that one is, I think, from New Zealand. Yeah, that one, no, the Veronica is from New Zealand. The Escallonia is from Chile and southern Argentina originally. We found these in other areas too, in gardens around Ireland. So they're quite common in Ireland.
Okay.
Now, in the planting to the left, you can see some fuchsia. Fuchsia magellanica, the hardy fuchsia, is not native, but it's naturalized all through Ireland, especially along roadsides. And it's originally from Chile and southern Argentina, just like the Escallonia. And the plant with the large leaves here, this is a part of the Rubus fruticosus. That's the common bramble. We'll see pictures of that later with the flowers, but these are just leafy specimens. And then they had this quite large Dracaena arborea, which is a tree Dracaena. And the bark is quite distinct. It's one of the ways you can differentiate it from the other species of Dracaena. And this particular species is from West Africa. But it seems to do very well in Ireland. That's been there quite a while, and it's there's eucalyptus behind it, so they can grow amazing plants in Ireland.
Okay,
And there's the guest house in the background. Here's the river. This is called the River Isle. And they have this beautiful little bridge with lined with stone walls going over to it. So next thing we're going to talk about is the different plants that are growing down here along the river.
okay,
So here's the riverbank, and then here's that donkey in the field. And we'll talk more about these in the next couple of slides, but this particular plant was in the umbelliferae or the Apiaceae, and it's called Enanthe crocata, and it's a very poisonous plant like our poison hemlock, and it's called a hemlock water dropwort. And that was quite common along the shorelines there.
okay,
And this is two of the most common plants they have there. The impatiens, which we have up near the Botanic Garden, growing wild in some of the river banks. This is the Himalayan balsam, and it's quite common along the rivers in this part of Ireland.
okay,
And these large leaves are the leaves of the butterbur, which is Petasites hybridus. And like our native Petasites, the flowers come up first and then they disappear and the leaves come out. So we didn't see any flowers at all. We were too late in the season. And this is July, so they bloom earlier, much earlier, sometime in June. But they're quite impressive, the size of them.
okay,
Another plant I was surprised to see was the Scrophularia. First I thought it was nodosa, but it looked a bit different. So I checked around the websites on Irish plants, and this is Scrophularia auriculata, the water figwort, and it always grows along riverbanks. The flowers are a bit more reddish rather than brown, like the ones we have in Western Newfoundland. It's not exactly an attractive flower, but it's a very interesting one with the rounded corolla. It's I particularly like it, but it's not a showy plant.
okay,
Now this is it gives you an example of some of the rock walls. There are rock walls everywhere. And this is in the Burren, and the name Burren has no relation to our barrens. It's related to the Gaelic name for a rocky place. So this particular area is part of the established, what they call the Burren, and it's where they have a lot of variety of interesting and rare species. And it's a lot. And you can see the rock wall is surrounding this kind of gravel area. As I mentioned before, there are very few places where you can pull over in Ireland off the roads, but they had this rectangle built into the side of the burn for cars and buses to pull over, so that I think they brought tour buses here and then let people roam around on the burn for a while. But that's the only time we ever saw a place like this to pull over.
okay,
And here's another picture of some of the rock walls. You can see them creeping up the hillside up here. They're just everywhere. And most of them establish property lines and pastures.
okay,
This rock wall has the Atlantic ivy growing all over it. And if you notice the leaves are simple, they're not lobed, and that's because when these plants flower, the branches that have the flowers only have simple leaves. Vegetative leaves are lobed. So these plants will be flower, but it was a little bit too early for that. And the shrubs in the background are the Corylus avellana, the hazelnut, the European hazelnut, they're quite common in our area, in this area.
Okay,
And here's an example of the vegetative specimen of the Atlantic ivy, Hedera hibernica. It's quite a nice ivy, but it grows everywhere. It grows on the bottom of the woodlands and up trees, just everywhere, over all the rock walls. Very common.
okay,
Okay, this is a very poor specimen of an oak tree, but this is Quercus petrea, and it's the Cecil oak or the Irish oak, and it's also the national tree of Ireland. But I'm sure they have much better specimens that they base that on. But this one is growing right on the rock wall there. And some of you may be familiar with Quercus robur, which is the English oak, and there's some of that planted in Newfoundland. And they differ in that this particular species has leaves that have a petiole, and the acorns are sessile, where the Quercus robur has sessile leaves and acorns on long peduncles. But other than that, the leaves look pretty similar.
okay,
Okay. And these are more pictures of the Fuchsia magellanica, the hardy fuchsia. Again, this was growing on a rock wall. It's beautiful. It was always the red and the purple variation. We occasionally saw an albino, a white one, but most of them, I'd say 99%, were this red and purple color form.
okay,
And here's another plant or colony of the Fuchsia magellanica, and it's growing on the other side of a barbed wire fence. But again, it's delineating pasture land.
okay,
Now, one of the things about the rock walls is that a lot of them will have rocks that the top layer are oriented vertically. And that was a really nice place for a lot of these plants to colonize. So you find a lot of interesting smaller things growing in these rock walls that had vertical rocks along the top. On the left-hand side, you see Polypodium vulgare, the common polypody. We have a similar species, Polypodium virginianum in Newfoundland, and it likes to grow on rock boulders. And on the picture in the right, that's one of my favorite plants I found there. This is Umbilicus rupestris, the navel wort or the wall pennywort. Another name I found for it is penny pies, but it's quite cute and a little. The petiole is attached at the base of the underneath of the leaf, so it looks like a little navel here in the center where the petiole is attached. And this plant was in the Cradulaceae, although that's the same family as Sedum roseum or Rhodiola rosea. You might be surprised to hear that.
okay,
And one of the campanulas we saw growing on rock walls is an introduced species called Campanula pusharskiana. Todd, you can correct me if I'm saying that wrong. The trailing bellwort. And you can see the corolla is a little bit more divided than our native harebells. And it's a creeping species rather than an erect species. And the leaves are quite lobed. It's quite a beautiful little thing.
okay,
And One of the ferns that we saw growing on the rock walls was the Splenium ruta muraria, and it's got very divided leaves. It's quite attractive. And then Galium verum is the plant on the left, I mean on the right, and that's the lady bedstraw. It's a yellow bedstraw, and the leaves are very small, so you don't really notice them even when they're open unless you get really close. But it's a beautiful little thing.
Okay,
And one of the sedums that we saw there, actually the only one that we saw was the sedum album. There's a native sedum too, but we never found it. This is the white stone crop, and it's introduced from Great Britain. And see, mixed in with it is our Geranium robertianum, which is native in Ireland too. And it occurs quite commonly with a lot of other species.
okay,
The picture on the left is the same sedum, but this one has some of the flowers starting to open. So you can see they're still quite small. They're these beautiful arching branches. And on the right, we have the fern, Asplenium trichomanes, the maidenhair spleenwort. It's quite a nice little plant.
okay,
And also found quite commonly on the rock walls is Calstegia sepium, the hedge bindweed. And they have a subspecies sepium, which is usually all white, as you can see here. There's no pink in these flowers.
okay,
Okay, and the roadsides in some places have these large stands of Valeriana rubra, and this is a red variety. We'll see some pink varieties later on, but this plant used to be called Centranthus rubra. So I don't know if any of you are from Great Britain, you may remember it under that name, but they've since combined that genus with Valeriana. So this is now Valeriana rubra. Beautiful plant.
okay,
And honeysuckles were also quite common along the roadsides and often growing up the telephone poles. This is Linistra paraclimatum, the European honeysuckle. Of course, they don't say European, they just call it honeysuckle or woodbine. And the flowers are can be white, yellow, or pink.
okay,
And here you can see one inflorescence on each side of the picture. And some of the flowers, the pink is the ones that are as they're opening, and then they turn white. And then when they're pollinated, then they turn yellow. So it's a beautiful display of flowers.
okay,
And I showed you the leaves of this before, the Rubus fruticosus, the bramble, the shrubby blackberry. This is really an aggregate species, and they haven't figured out the taxonomy of that yet. So there are pink varieties and there are white varieties, and no one really knows what's happening with them yet. But most of the ones that we saw were like this. They were pink and quite beautiful to see. You can see how many flower buds there are here with each of the clusters.
okay,
And here you can see why you wouldn't want to fall into a patch of the brambles, because you would get torn apart pretty easily by these large prickles. And those of you who haven't heard the word prickles before, if you've been calling them thorns, thorns are modified branches, where prickles are modified layers of the epidermis, and these are actually prickles. So we'll see thorns later on in one of the other plants, in the shrubby plants.
okay,
One of the things we wanted to see was the Cliffs of Moher, which was near Doolin, and they had a ferry that went there, a boat that went there from the ferry terminal in Doolin. And we were about an hour early for the ferry, so Bill and I poked around the shoreline. You can see it's limestone along the shores too. And just show you a few pictures of the plants that we found there.
Okay,
Atriplex glabreuscula, that's a plant that we have in Newfoundland too, but not all that common apparently. And we call it the glabrous orac, they call it Babington's orac. And then Armeria meridima, which is a thrift or sea pink. We got there after flowering for this species, so they were already past their prime. We couldn't see any pink flowers, just the dried up calyces. And they have subspecies meridima, we have subspecies siberica.
okay,
It took me a while to figure out what this plant was, but this is the beet, you know, like the kind you eat. It's just a subspecies meridima. And not every taxonomic database separates them, but this is the sea beet, this subspecies. And it's quite common in the shorelines. And these are the young inflorescences. They're just starting to flower. And then over here, these are already setting fruit. This is an enlargement of the fruit. So you have two flowers backing onto each other, and then the sexual parts would be hidden in the sepals there. So it's an unusual looking inflorescence too.
okay,
They have 3 Coachlarias, species of Coachlaria in Ireland, and this is the common one, Coachlaria officinalis. We have Tridactylides and Cyclocarpa, so they don't look the same. They don't form the nice rosettes that we get in the ones in Newfoundland, but they're still quite attractive in the coastal areas. They're in the mustard family, the Brassicaceae, so you get the 4 petals. And the one on the right, we used to call it Anagalus. Now it's Lysomacia arvensis, the scarlet pimpernel. And Howard has posted pictures of this on the wildflower site, I think from Mundy Pond, Howard, or that area. Near there.
I think he's still muted.
Okay.
Yes, it's in
Oh,
the
yes.
goals.
Yeah, cool, okay.
Yeah, okay,
And when I first saw this Silene, oh, did you get there yet, Silene?
yes, we see that.
Okay. I just thought it was the typical one that we have too, but it's not. This is a different one. This is a sea campion, and the petals are quite a bit broader than ours. This is Silene uniflora, and all along the coastal areas we saw this.
Okay,
Another plant that was growing in those coastal areas, you can see some of the sea thrift here, the brown leftovers from the flowers. This is a Tripolium pedonicum, the sea aster. It's a genus that's restricted to Europe and probably Western Asia, but we don't get it in North America at all. But it's very attractive. And then on the left, we have Brassica rapa. The first sight, I thought it was just Barbaria vulgaris, but it's the field mustard, which is an introduced species there, Brassica rapa.
okay,
And the little daisy-like plant that was there all over the beaches was a Trifloraspermum meridimum, the sea mayweed. And the leaves are very dissected, and they're quite fleshy too. They're not flat like the other ones that are more terrestrial. They're quite fleshy because they're halophytes.
okay,
And this is the boat that's going to take us over to the Cliffs of Moher. And you see the name of the boat's called the Happy Hooker. That was rather funny. But it was a bit of a breeze to that day, so it was an interesting trip going over there.
Okay,
Now, the Cliffs of Moher, unlike the surrounding areas that around Doolin, are made out of shale and sandstone, where everything else surrounding it is limestone. And they're quite steep cliffs, as you can see, and they're a very famous tourist attraction. We're on top of the cliffs here in the Geopark, but the boat will take us down below after. And see, there are two other towers over here. And there's a walking path that goes over this way. You can see those little dots. There are 3 people on the trail. So you can get a coast trail that goes over there if you want to take that long a walk.
okay,
And this picture is obviously taken from the boat, and it shows the Cliffs of Moher below where we were standing before, and that sea stack. And apparently there are 20 different species of, over 20 species of nesting birds there, including murres, razorbills, fulmars, kittiwakes, and puffins. It's hard to see them here because these are so tall and large, but the next picture I can show you a bit more detail, not a whole lot though.
okay,
It really needed a high-powered telephoto to see the birds, but here you can see all these little white dots. Those are the little birds on the sea stacks. And this is one of the most important nesting sites for this whole area. This cliffs and the sea stack are an important site for nesting seabirds in Ireland. And the tower on the left is called O'Brien's Tower, built by a person named O'Brien. And it's on the Cliffs of Moher. And when you enter the Geopark, there's an interpretation center built into the cliff. And then you just follow the trails up. It's quite a beautiful little park.
okay,
And there are cows all around in the fields surrounding the visitors area of the park. And you can see the statue that they have in the near the visitor center, commemorating the Cliffs of Park experience. So this is a geopark that's quite well attended every year. And here's the trail that goes over to those other castles. And this, I think, is a reputation of one of those other castles.
okay,
And when we were waiting for the ferry, we noticed that there were a lot of kids just waiting around the dock, and not where the boat was, but the other side. And they were jumping off the water, and they were all looking for dolphins. And later on that night, we went back to see the sunset, and here we see a dolphin with his fin just coming out of the water. So there were quite a number of dolphins at the ferry terminal. That was the only good picture I had with it. It was clear.
okay,
Now, the next set of slides I'm going to show are mainly from the Burren. Just wanted to show you the comparison. Like, this is your typical valley with pasture land. And then over here, you see this rocky area. This is the start of the Burren here.
okay,
And I did this, it's just a generalization of the map from the geology of Ireland. So I only put in 2 of the important plants that are rock types we're going to talk about. And that's the limestone here and the basalt, which I'll get to in a minute. But limestone covers 65% of Ireland. So you remember that limestone is formed when areas are inundated by seawater. So these areas obviously had risen up after that, but all those areas have limestone bedrock. And the oldest rocks in Ireland are somewhere up around here, and they're 1.7 billion years old. That's in Northern Ireland. In the Burren, this is just one small area that we looked at, but the entire Burren area covers 530 square kilometers. And the limestone that's here in the center, there in this whole brown area, that was formed 325 million years ago. Let's see, and then later on you'll see the Giant's Causeway, and I just wanted to show you, this is the area here where that's where the Giant's Causeway is. This whole area is a plateau of basalt, which was formed by volcanic activity. That was about 60 million years ago.
Okay,
Now, those of you who've been up to Cape Norman will recognize the karst landscape. You have limestone bedrock that's divided into different sections. And these crevices are called grikes. And in Ireland, they spell them with a Y, but other people spell them with an I. So either way is fine. They're both pronounced grikes. And these are formed when rainwater, which is a little bit acidic, seeps into the cracks in the limestone, and then it dissolves the rock gradually and forms these fissures. So those are called grikes.
okay,
And here you can just see a closer view of the karst landscape, you know, the grikes, and we'll get, and the surface, it's quite eaten out here. So it's almost a bit dangerous to walk on because you don't know if which layer is going to collapse underneath your foot. But gradually it's eroding, and it's not going to last forever, that's for sure. But it'll still be there in our lifetime.
okay,
And those of you who've been to the White Rocks and Flowers Cove will recognize limestone pavement. And this is, you know, when the surface is smooth, this is caused by glaciation. It's smoothed out the surface. And so the flat surfaces are called plinths, and the crevices are called grikes. You know, in the pavement, you have the plinths all forming together into mainly a larger unit. But when they're separated, they're all called plinths.
okay,
So this picture shows another section of the pavement that's been divided up a bit more deeply into plinths and grikes. And those are both features of the karst landscape. So the next few set of pictures I'm going to show are from the areas in the plants that are growing in the grikes. Well, here's first. Oh, forgot to ask.
okay,
You can see the grikes can take on a lot of different shapes. They don't have to be just straight, but these are just some of the odd formations that we saw there.
okay,
And most of a lot of the Burren is more in upland areas, but in this lower area, you have the limestone pavement, and you get a lot of grassier areas. And this is mainly where you get some of the other species growing.
okay.
Now, if any of you were involved in the limestone Burren recovery meetings out on the West Coast in Plum Point years ago, Brendan Dunford came over from Ireland to talk to us because he's one of the main caretakers and experts on the Burren in Ireland. So we had met him. He gave a talk to us years ago. And so when Bill and I went there, we looked him up, and he brought us around to a nice, interesting site on the Burren and showed us a few of the species. And Brendan is still working out there, and he has a organization that pulls all the farmers together, and they work together with the committee, and they make sure that the burn isn't overgrazed or undergrazed, and they have to have some bit of grazing in the burn, because otherwise the shrubs will take over. So there's a fine line between an open grassland and a shrubby area, and Brendan helps everyone understand the best way to keep the burn the way it is for people to appreciate.
Okay,
And here, one of the trees that grows in Ireland, the Fraxinus excelsior, which those of you who have been on the trip with Howard will remember we saw out in Torbay on the Gallows Cove trip. You can see the interesting grapes here too, and then the Fraxinus growing right out of the creek, out of the grake. And this is a plant that's been left to grow along the area that's more farmland. And so this is what it can grow. This is how a nice form of the ash can get to be.
okay,
And we've found this holly quite often too in the grikes or in the rock walls. This is the English holly, the same kind that you can buy in the grocery store at Christmas time, but here it's native.
okay,
And this particular plant is a hawthorn. We have a couple of native hawthorns in Newfoundland, but they're not all that well known, and they mainly occur in central and western Newfoundland. But this is a Crataegus monogyna, and it differs a lot from ours in that the leaves are quite divided. Where ours just have small indentations along the margins, these are very divided. And this one is growing quite close to the ground, but it can get to be fairly large shrub size.
okay,
And this is another splenium that grows in the rocks, a splenium satiric. It used to be in the genus, I think, Satirica, but they put it in a splenium again. So this is called rusty back, and it's the reason for that name is that the lower surface of the fronds has hairs that are rusty brown. Right now, these are young fronds coming out, so the hairs are white. You can just see it on the edges here, but those will turn rusty brown as the season progresses. And again, you get your geranium robertianum sticking around everywhere.
okay,
And a couple of the other ferns that grow in the rocks and the grikes and the crevices are Tritium aquilinum, which is our bracken fern. And this is a subspecies aquilinum, which is the typical one. We have a different subspecies. So this one is much finer, and the fronds are more delicate and softer than the ones that we have. And this is Polystichum aculeatum, called the hard shield fern. And it particularly likes these crevices in the limestone rocks.
okay,
Another beautiful asplenium they have is, this used to be in a different genus before too, but now it's back in asplenium. Asplenium scolopendrium, the hart's tongue fern, has undivided fronds, and just long linear tongue-shaped fronds. And you can just see some impressions of lines in here. Those lighter areas, when they're ripe, the sori are on the lower surface, and you just get vertical lines of sori rather than circular sori. But we didn't see any that were ripe, just young yet. And the fern on the left is Asplenium muraria, which you saw in the rock walls too. This is the wall root. It scrambles a lot over the rocks in the burn.
Okay,
And then there's we found a Valeriana, this is a excelsa subspecies Bustifolia, the elderleaf valerian. It's a bit smaller than the common valerian, but it definitely likes these grapes. And then on the right is the Lactuca muralis. It used to be in the genus Mycellus. This is a wall lettuce. It's a very nice open inflorescence of another plant in the Asteraceae, the Lactuca. Another geranium down there.
okay,
And on the left, we have an Epipactus. In Newfoundland, we have Epipactus helleborine, which is introduced. And in Ireland, they have this native one, which is a dark red helleborine. Down here, you can see two flowers that have opened or starting to open, but these all are still in bud, so they haven't come out. We were just a bit early for them. So the only time we saw that Epipactus is very attractive. And then the shrub in the background, that's Prunus spinosa, the sloe, which is like a plum. It's related to plums. It's what they make sloe gin from. And here you can see these are true thorns, where thorns are modified branches, and they'll have buds on them. Real thorns have buds on them. So the Prunus spinosa gets its name by the thorns. On the right, we have Euphrasia salisburgensis var hypernica. And this is the Irish arbright. This is the one that's been reported, I think, from Daniels Harbor generations ago, and it's never been found since and probably is lost. But you can recognize it in Ireland because the leaves are always this coppery color, brownish red color. And the flowers are typical, just white with just a hint of purple on them and a yellow spot. But the color of the vegetation is usually what you see first. And then this is thyme growing around it. We'll see some more thyme later.
okay,
And some of the areas you can see when we get up to the slopes, you have a lot less vegetation because there's a lot of rocks. And there's probably a lot of movement of the rocks, especially in the winter or in rain. So you don't get as much vegetation stabilizing there. But everywhere you get those rock walls. And here's
okay,
it's an example of one of the more beautiful rock walls that we saw in the Burren. Just beautifully made. Imagine how long it would take to make a wall like that, and then there's several miles long each.
okay,
And some of those rocky areas, the open rocky areas, had Valeriana rubra. You saw the red form of that before. This is the more typical one. It's more of a pinkish one, and it's quite a beautiful little plant. I wouldn't mind having this introduced on our roadsides.
okay,
And one of the nicer little what do you call them? This is wood sage, Teucrium scoradonia. It's in a little mint, and it's got a beautiful lobed lip, and then the anthers just extend out. They're exerted from the corolla tube. It's a beautiful little wood sage, and that was quite common in the rocky areas. Here's the very textured leaf too.
okay,
The only pussy toes we saw was the mountain everlasting Antoneria dioica, and we were past the flowering stage. But when they're in flower, the flowers are pinkish. But when they're in fruit, all you see is the bristles and the kind of brownish white involucral bracts here, but they're quite large compared to our pussy toes. There's a little bit of that flax that we get in Newfoundland too here, the fairy flax growing. And of course the Lotus corniculatus, the bird's foot trefoil that grows in the Burren too.
Okay.
And an interesting thistle that I'd never seen before is called the carline thistle, Carlina vulgaris. This one is just starting to open. We didn't get there for the peak of the flowers. And this one is still in bud. You can see that the bracts around the involucre, they have these branched hairs, very dense hairs, almost like thistles. And there's no mistaking this plant. It's the only one that has these branched hairs on them, trichomes. This one has a black stem, and this one has the yellow stem. I don't know if there's any meaning to that, maybe just exposure, but we saw both of these lines. That's Carlina vulgaris.
Okay.
Two other things that we saw were, well, this one here on the left is the Cirsium dissectum, the meadow thistle. This is native to Ireland, and we don't get this in North America. It only has one head, usually. And then on the right, you see that the one that we're used to seeing, this is what we call the bull thistle, they call it the spear thistle. And these again are young, they haven't started a flower yet. So the involucre is more spare, it will open up and have your typical purplish red flowers. But I was hoping we'd see some Scottish thistle, but it turns out that Scottish thistle doesn't grow in Ireland unless it's in someone's garden.
Okay.
And this is Sanchez arvensis, the perennial sow thistle. But everyone that we saw in the Burren had white ray flowers. And we never did see one that is just yellow, but they all key out the same way. So I don't know if it's just something thing, or if they just assume that they can be either yellow or white. But it was quite attractive. The plant itself is a bit straggly, but the flowers were nice.
Okay.
This is another plant that we never saw before. This is Polygula vulgaris. It's the common milkwort. There's another milkwort, Polygula serpilifolia, but that has fewer leaves or fewer flowers on the inflorescence. This has at least 10 on, the whole length of it when it's in flower. And here, this shows a fruit of the Polygula. And they're very tiny. Maybe that's only a couple inches tall, this plant here. There's a little bit of lobing in the petals there. Beautiful blue though.
Okay.
And this one is Potentilla erecta, tormentile. And you can tell this one from a lot of the other Potentillas because you only have 4 petals. And then you get the little yellow or darker yellow center around the base of each petal. And the leaves are palmately divided. And it grows sort of erect, but when it gets up, it kind of bends over. So it's not completely erect.
Okay.
Thyme grows everywhere there, and the species is supposedly the same one that we keep seeing. And the name has changed a number of times, but the current name, according to Plants of the World Online, is Thymus praecox, subspecies Britannicus. And common name is mother of thyme or wild thyme. And this grows everywhere on the rocks and amongst any other species. And we were just there when they were starting to flower. So we were able to catch a few spots where we got some nice flowering specimens. But you can see that's not much of a depression there. There's not much of a soil base for that plant to be growing, but it's doing quite well.
Okay,
We have Dryas integrifolia in Newfoundland in the limestone barrens, and it's called integrifolia because the leaves are entire. But here in Ireland, they have Dryas octopadula, which is supposed to have 8 petals on each of the flowers, and the leaves are quite crenate. The margins are quite crenate, so it's very easy to identify it. And they were just going out of flowers, so we didn't see very many flowers, mostly fruiting heads, but we did see an occasional flower. They're quite nice.
okay,
So the pictures I showed you before are mainly what's growing in the rocky cracks and the rockier areas. Now I'll show you pictures of plants that are growing mainly in the grassy areas. And you can see this is still all the Burren back here. And there is a national park that includes part of the Burren. And there are some established trails too. We didn't have time to take advantage of all the trails though, unfortunately.
okay,
And one of the plants that we saw was Hypericum pulchrum. And this is the slender St. John's wort. This was erroneously reported from Newfoundland in the past. What we have now is they found out it was a maculatum. But this is what the true pulchrum looks like. It's very slender, and the buds are kind of orangish red to start with, and then the stems are red too. It's easy to spot in the Burren because of the colors, but it's quite a small little thing, but we saw that occasionally. And then this is a new thing, I've never even heard of this one before. Sinanchica parnaca, the common name for this is squincy wort. And I had to look up what squincy meant, but apparently squincy, whoops, I need to turn, I'm gonna go back. Squincy refers to sore throats. So this plant was used in the medieval times to help cure sore throats. So that's where the name squincy wort comes from. But it may not see it, the resemblance here, but this is in the Rubiaceae, the same family as your bedstraws. So it's just a different genus.
okay,
And this is what a lot of the grassy areas look like. You get a multitude of different species all mixed in together. It's quite a beautiful little meadow, you know, when you get a chance to look at everything. This particular grass, you can't see it too clearly, but that's a brisa. And then you've got all the geraniums. This is Geranium sanguineum, the bloody cranesbill. And then you get the dactylorhizas. And then here's some more of that lady's bedstraw, the Galium verum, and more Tomentile Potella erecta. There's a wide variety of things growing together in all these grassy areas.
okay,
And these two pictures here are both the same species and variety. This is Dactylorhiza fuchsii, var fuchsii. And the common name is the common spotted orchid, but they look like more like loops and lines to me than spots. But that's the common name it was given. And then the plant on the left is the Dactylorhiza maculata, which is the heath spotted orchid. And this definitely just has spots on the lip. So that one is more appropriately named. And the identity of all the dactylorhizas was confirmed by Richard Bateman for me. So, and the two, oops, I'll wait till.
okay, yeah, we're good.
The two plants on the left are the same variety. This is Dactylorhiza fuchsii var ocellii. And they're basically white. You can see here there's a bit of a purple tinge to some of the flowers when they first open, but when they're fully open, they're all white. So this is O'Kelly's spotted orchid. Quite beautiful. I love these. And then the plant on the left is a small twablate that we found in the part of the Burren Park. This is Neotia ovata. And the the ovary and the young capsules are very spherical compared to the ones that much larger to the ones that we have in Newfoundland. So the neota used to be called Listera.
Okay.
This is a genus that I'd never seen before. It's very attractive, Gymnadenia. And this is the species Gymnadenia densiflora, the fragrant, marsh fragrant orchid. Now, there's another one that's similar to this, which I'll show you next, but how you tell them apart is this particular species has all the lobes of the lip fairly even. This one is often a little bit shorter, but never longer. And then the sepals on the side, the edges curve backwards, so you get the more revolute on the other side. So this is the marsh fragrant orchid. They're quite beautiful plants.
Okay.
And these two pictures are Gymnadenia Causeway, the chalk fragrant orchid. And with these, the middle lobe is longer than the other two. And the plants are a bit pinker too. The flowers are pinker, not as much purple. And the plant on the left, this is, I think, the only Platanthera we saw there. This is Platanthera bifolia. And I couldn't get a better shot of it, but when you blow up that picture, you can see that the lip is green. So the other petals, the other part of the corolla is white, but just the lip is green. So this is called the lesser butterfly orchid, very different than what we call a butterfly orchid.
Okay.
And then we saw this meadow vetchling growing kind of common on in the grassy areas and in the rocks. This is Lathyrus pratensis. I think Henry's showed us different populations of this in other areas of Newfoundland too.
Okay.
And then there common Urtica dioica, common nettle. Everyone is familiar with that. If not that species, another variety of it. And in the center, we have Odontides vernus, the red Bartzia, very small flowers. I think Glenn Ryan may have found some of this once and posted a picture of it on the Wildflower Society page or on the Wildflower Facebook page. And then on the left, we have one of the other common roses, Rosa spinosissima, the Burnet rose. And you can certainly see from the stems how very prickly those stems are. You wouldn't want to hold on to those stems for sure.
Okay.
And this is a species that I'm sure Henry is familiar with, and he has showed us, and probably a lot of other students, this plant that grows in Stephenville area. This is Amphyllus vulneraria, the kidney vetch. It's native to Ireland, but introduced to Newfoundland. I just think it's very pretty with all these white hairs at the base of each of the flowers.
Okay.
And in the denser grassy areas, you get your typical valerian, Valeriana officinalis, and Filipendula ulmaria. If any of you have done any traveling on the southwest coast of Newfoundland, you'll see Filipendula ulmaria growing quite commonly. And Matt, if you've been up around Harbor Grace on the other side of the harbor where in the community, this grows in the fields up there too, Filipendula ulmaria. It's a very attractive plant.
Okay.
Now, these two pictures are of the same species, though they look quite different. This is Orobanche alba, the thyme broom grape, and they call it that because it's parasitic on the roots of thyme, Thymus vulgare, or whatever they call it. But I couldn't understand where the white comes from because the flowers are either this light yellow or like a pale pink color. And this white color here is from a flax plant in the background. It's not part of the Orabanki, but you have these three lobed lower corolla, lower lip on the corolla. It's very interesting. And these plants were very common all throughout Ireland. We were just, I guess, at the right time of the year to see them. So this is Orabanki alba. Now, I think you all remember Orabanki Terranove or uniflora from Newfoundland. That's been put in the genus Aphyllon. But all of the old world Orabankis have stayed in the genus Orabanki.
Okay.
And on the right, we've got more Pteridia, the bracken fern, with some more of the corylus in the background. You can see the burn back here, and there's a more pasture land over here. So this is typical roadside vegetation. And then a lot of times just underneath these areas, you'll find plants like this, which is Melanpyrum pratense, the common cowweed. We have a different species in Newfoundland. It's a lineary, but this is the one that's native to Ireland. It is also in the Orabancaceae. It's a hemiparasite.
Okay.
Now we're getting out of the barrens or the Burren, and we're getting into the roadsides leaving out of the Doolin area. So this is Silene Floss cuculi, and anyone who's been on one of Howard's trips to Gallows Cove will remember this plant from there too. But it's beautiful, one of my favorite Silenes.
Okay.
Now we've left the Burren area, and we've gone past Galway, and we're entering the area called Connemara. And there's a craft shop on the other side of the road from the statue called Joyce's Craft Shop. The man's last name is Joyce that made it. And he commissioned this sculpture. And the Connemara giant commemorates a high king from the 2nd century. And he was a very famous warrior back then. And the legend has it that if you touch his hand that's holding the rock, that the wisdom of the ancient tribes will be imparted to you. So apparently children who are waiting for their exams, they'll go and touch the rock or the hand of the giant to hopefully help them pass their tests. Now the plant on the left is Ulex europaeus, the gorse. We were there after flowering, so all we saw was the fruiting structures, not the beautiful yellow flowers. But the leaves are quite spiny, so we really couldn't get too close to it.
Okay.
And one of the surprising things about traveling on the roads in Ireland is that you come across these very interesting little houses that are all quite different. And this one was just one that really stuck out to me, and had to include that in the presentation. Beautiful little pink house.
Okay.
And as we're heading north, you can see the roads are still very narrow with rock walls close by. So again, riding is tricky. Remember, this is in Great Britain or Ireland, so you're riding on the left-hand side of the road instead of the right.
Okay.
Another one of those interesting houses here. This one has a thatched roof. And we found a few of them around, but they weren't as common as you'd think. I guess they're just starting to go out of favor now with all the modern techniques. They had a beautiful rock wall around the whole property with the rocks in the top, erect rocks, just to keep people from climbing over that easily.
Okay.
We were able to pull into one waiting area along the highway, and we got down and looked into this roadside bog, which was sort of quite grassy towards the roadside. But we did see a few species that are typical of the bogs and the heaths there. And on the left, you can see Erica tetralix, the crossleaf heath, the beautiful pink Erica. You can see it's got 4 leaves at each node.
Okay,
And then we found Narthecium ossifragum, which is the bog asphodel. It's actually in its own family, Nartheciaceae. I'd never even heard of that one before, but it's related to Tophieldia. It's just a different family, and it's always yellow. And then in the center, there's another species of heath. This is a Daboecia santabrica or cantabrica, and the common name is St. Daboecis heath. Now I had to look up, see who St. Daboeis is, and that's just an old ancient name for David. So that's what Daboeis means. The plant on the right is Pedicularis sylvatica, which we have in the Avalon area too. I'm sure that John has shown people a lot of these populations around the Avalon Peninsula. This is the Irish lousewort.
okay,
We saw a lot of peat harvesting, but again, we couldn't stop very often because there's always cars behind us and no places to pull over. But they would dig up the peat in rows and then just put the blocks up, cut them into brick-sized shapes and then just put them up on the surface to dry out. So you often see these piles of peat on the piled up on the heath as you're driving by.
okay,
We saw some harvesting from the forestry practices. The center area in the middle here, that's all from clear cut. And here's some of the forest that's been left standing. Based on pollen samples from the bogs, they found out that historians found out that there were forests covering about 80% of Ireland at one time. Now there's less than 11% of the land base is forested. And when there are maps that you can see online that show the private and the commercial forest, and they're just scattered everywhere. There's no like large expanses of forest, just scattered spots here and there.
okay,
And in this particular area where you're getting further north, north of Galway, there's a lot more sheep than there are anything else on the road. And in 2016 in Ireland, there were reported 4.8 million people and 5.2 million sheep. So there's a lot of sheep around. Almost every field had sheep in them. You can see the purple digitalis over here again.
okay,
And we pulled into one area that had just been harvested, or an area where I guess the machinery had been sitting, so we were able to pull off the road. And these 3 sheep came over to see who we were. And these turned out to be Scottish black-faced sheep, which are the more common sheep north of Galway. And they're very nice, a long, straight fur or hair, wool, I guess. And when we were back at the craft shop across from the Connemara statue, we asked them where a place would be to get lunch, and they recommended this place, which is the Lodge Hotel, which is on Loch Ena. And Loch just means lake. It's the Irish equivalent of Loch, L-O-C-H, from Scotland. And Ena means place of ivy, and you can see from this ivy covered estate that ivy is quite common in this area. Now we'll talk more about this one later, the next talk I give, because they had very gorgeous gardens growing around it too. But I just wanted to show you the ivy there. And across from that building, the hotel there is one of the mountains of the 12 Bends range.
Right.
So you had a very nice scenery in the area, and that loch or loch, whatever it's called, is a favorite fishing spot. So a lot of the people that were staying at the lodge were fishermen, so they'd be going around with their fishing hats and their rods all the time.
Okay,
And along the northern coastal areas, the northern roadsides, you'll see a lot of the rhododendrons. We were past the flowering stage, but this is Rhododendron ponticum, the most common rhododendron in Ireland, and it's introduced. And you can see a few in the foreground here. These are swamp milkweed, Cirsium, forget what it was I said. Anyway, it's a swamp milkweed. They're native in Ireland, but introduced in Newfoundland. Austria, I think. Did it switch?
no, not quite yet. There we go. Okay,
Okay. This is Killary, excuse me, Killary Fjord. It's the only real fjord in Ireland. And apparently the sides of the fjord below the level are much steeper than the ones that you see above. But this is, you can actually rent or get a space on a boat that takes you out. They take tours the length of the fjord. It's certainly not as breathtaking a scenery as you get on the in Grossmore, but it's still interesting area. And again, the foxglove is everywhere, growing in all the roadsides here.
okay,
And at the end of the fjord, there's the town of Leenon, and it's famous because this is where you go if you want to get a seaweed bath. They fill up bathtubs with seaweed that they get from the fjord, and then you just sit in the seaweed for as long as you like.
okay,
And we got to Ballyshannon. We crossed this bridge that you see here, and we were looking for a place to pull off. And we found a little area called Town Parks, and it had an old wharf. And we walked down this I don't know what do you call landing, and found this nice mud flat.
okay,
So what we found mainly in this is the River Earn. We had a coach Larry that we had in Doolin too, but it's much taller here because you don't get as much exposure from the wind. And then the tall leaves are the leaves of that the sea aster. We're further north, so they haven't started to flower yet. They're just in bud. But this is that Dicoleum nonicum, the sea aster. And then there's your typical triglocan and your Plantago marittima growing in there too. That's the goose tongue or sea plantain and arrowgrass. Those are the same in Newfoundland.
okay,
And on one side of the ramp there, they had these stone steps going down. And there were these swans swimming around there the whole time. There were the little cygnets. I don't know if you can see their bills. They're blue, which I thought was interesting. And I'd never gotten that close to these swans before. Now, the town of Galway is famous for having swans in their harbor, but they have them also in Ballyshannon.
okay,
The next place we stayed was called Cavangarden House. This is an old estate. This is a similar situation where as the estates get passed down to new generations and family numbers are decreasing, people can't afford the upkeep. So they start opening up their estates to tourists, turn them into B&Bs. And it's a great place to stay because the places are very interesting, full of antiques and interesting stories to tell, and the grounds are just gorgeous. This particular one had a lot of forest around that we walked through. So I have some pictures just after this to show you. But this was another one of the B&Bs, and they had a formal dining room, which is gorgeous.
Okay.
So these are two pictures of the woods behind the Cavangarden house, and this is the same stream, just different views of it. So they're not connected. I guess black line shows you they're separate. And it was constantly raining, that particular day. So we had on our raincoats, and it's quite a wet day. So you'll see in the pictures of the plants next that everything is covered in raindrops.
Next.
This one is Aramaculatum. The common name is Lords and Ladies or Cuckoo Point. I'm not sure where that name comes from, but we got there just the wrong time, I think, because we didn't catch the flowers, which have a very beautiful yellow hood. Remember the Jack in the Pulpit, what that looks like if you've ever seen that. This one is more upright and yellow. And these are the fruits, but they're very unripe yet. They will turn bright red once they're ripe. And then these are the leaves. They're sort of arrow shaped, but with a rounded lobe base, not a pointed base. So this is your Aramaculatum.
Okay.
And that same asplenium that we saw in the Greggs of the limestone barren or the Burren, here they have them growing all over the riversides. The most common fern along the riversides is this asplenium, the hart's tongue fern.
Okay.
And you can see the ivy, the Atlantic ivy is crawling up the beech trees. They're just go everywhere. As you saw in the other picture too, they're growing in the understory all over the forest floor. And one of the herbs that we saw there was this Stachys sylvatica, the hedge woundwort. It's we have a different Stachys in Newfoundland, but this is the sylvatica, the hedge woundwort. That's in the mint family too. And then there's Circea intermedia, which is found in Ireland, and it's a hybrid that established in Ireland, and they don't have either of the parents in Ireland anymore. So it's the only thing you'll find over there. This is the upland enchanted nightshade. It's a cross between alpina and lutetiana.
Okay.
The most common maple tree over in Ireland is Acer pseudoplatanus, which there's plenty of in St. John's. If you ever notice the maple trees with long yellow dangly flowers in the springtime, that's your sycamore maple. Up on Cuckold's Cove, you can see lots of them too, and planted all through town. And seems to really prefer coastal areas because outside of Newfoundland, you really don't find it in North America. So in here, it really loves the Irish climate. And in the right, you have Alnus glutinosa, the black alder. There's, I think, some populations. I'm not sure if they're there anymore, but reported from the west coast of Newfoundland. But you can easily tell this apart from any of our alders because the leaves are all rounded at the tip and rather than pointed. And these
Also,
can grow quite.
next.
And one of the things that was growing in amongst all the other plants was Galium apari, the cleavers or goosegrass. And this is one that there was one plant reported years ago from the Avalon, but it hasn't been seen since, so it's been taken off our list. But it's native to Ireland. It's quite a clingy one, you know, there are retrourse bristles all through it. And then on the right is an interesting Vicia sepium, the bush vetch, beautiful purple little pea-shaped flowers.
Okay,
And we're on our way to the Giant's Causeway, and we went through the town of Bush Mills. And we noticed all the streamers in that. And it turns out that we were there on the 9th of July, and the 11th of July is the big bonfire night in Northern Ireland, where they celebrate their separation from, or independence from, the Republic of Ireland. So I think we're glad we weren't there for the bonfires.
okay,
And this is an overview of part of the Giant's Causeway. It's a huge area, so you can't get it all in and get any detail. And I did Photoshop out some of the people, because they're the ones on the edges, because they were just crawling everywhere. You know, you could barely find a spot that didn't have people crawling on it. When you go to the site, they have these huge buses that take people down. So you have maybe 50 or 60 people coming out of the bus at the same time, and then the bus goes up and it comes back down with more people. So it's a very popular tourist attraction all through the summer. Now, the Giant's Causeway, as you can see, is all rock, and it's a World Heritage Site, and it's run by the National Trust. And all of the rocks on there are basalt columns. You see the next picture yet?
yes, now,
Okay.
yes,
And there are some over 40,000 vertical basalt columns at this site. It's just amazing.
okay,
Now, here's a closer view of the columns that you can walk on. The myth, there is an interpretation center that I found out later opened just the year that we went there. So it was a beautiful new interpretation center. And they have a running animated film with no voice, because people from all over the world come to visit. So they didn't want to make it difficult for people to understand. So it's just totally animated. And the myth is that Finn McCool, who was an Irish giant, there was another giant on the other side in Scotland, and they were rivals and they wanted to have a fight. So Finn McCool built this causeway of rocks over to Scotland to fight the Scottish giant Benendomer. And when he saw the size of the Scottish giant, he ran back over to Ireland, and his wife hid him in a cradle like a baby. And then when Benendomer came to see him, he saw the baby and thought, oh, if the baby is that big, then McCool must be huge. So he ran back to Scotland and destroyed the causeway that Finn McCool had built between Scotland and Ireland. Obviously, that's not true, but in the island of Staffa in Scotland, there's an identical site to this. But it's on an island that's off the coast, and there's no real access to it. You can see pictures online, you know, aerial views. But if you want to see these beautiful basalt columns, this is where to go, the north part of Ireland.
okay,
Okay, so here's some sketches as you go into the site. There are these vertical basalt columns on the hillside. And on the side of the cove facing this site, which I didn't show a picture of, there's immense walls of these columns. And the geology sites talk about how these developed because when the lava came up 60 million years ago, as it cooled, it split into these, it fractured into these hexagons. So that's why you have them all formed like this. This is a result of the cooling of the lava.
Okay,
And in between some of the vertical columns, you'd find these colonies of Plantego marittima, which is a sea plantain. We have these in Newfoundland too. And if you go to Green Point in Grossmoor, you'll see the same kind of thing. The plantain growing right out of the sides of the cliff. And then there was another plant there that I found between the rocks and the wet areas down by the shoreline. And it was a plant I'd never seen before, these interesting divided leaves. This is another Plantego coronopus, the buckshorn plantain. It's a coastal species, so you'd only find it along the coast. We don't have it in North America.
okay,
And in between some of the columns and the short coastal areas, you'll get little populations here. This is a Cochlearia danica, the Danish scurvy grass. So it's a little bit different, a little smaller than the Cochlearia officinalis, and it's native to this area and Eastern Europe, Western Europe. And again, the Silene uniflora that we saw out in Doolin, it was growing here at the base of the columns and in any of the wetter depressions.
okay,
And not too far from the Giant's Causeway is the Dunluce Castle. We got there just as they were closing, so we couldn't go in and look around. But this is a view from the outside. And if any of you have children or grandchildren who are fans of the Game of Thorns, what's that TV show? Crown of Thorns, Game of Thorns. Anyway,
Thrones.
this is one of the what?
I think it's Game of Thrones. Perhaps.
Game of Thrones, yeah. Okay. Well, this is one of the filming sites that they used, this castle.
Okay,
And on the fields surrounding it, there was a lot of this Heracleum spondylium, which we also have in Newfoundland, especially in the Trepassey area. It's introduced to Newfoundland, but it's quite common in Ireland. We found some in the Burren areas too, in the grassy areas, but it was much bigger here on the northern coast of Ireland.
okay,
And again, we're heading south now down towards Belfast, and we're going towards the dark hedges. But this one road was just covered in vegetation. And again, the walls are probably rock walls just covered in vegetation. But it just shows you how dense everything is there and how green everything is.
okay,
Okay, now we get to the dark hedges, and this is just the entrance. This is an avenue of 150 beech trees. They were planted by a guy named Stewart. I forget his first name now. Let me see. James Stewart, and he built this in 1775. He planted the trees on the entrance to his estate with his wife.
okay,
And I should say too that beech trees are not native to Ireland. These are all imported over from England. See that one?
yeah, Okay,
And of the original 150 trees, only 82 are left now as of 2021. And it's mainly climate that has gotten to them, winds knock them down or things like that happen, and just old age hits them. But recently in 2017, they put a ban on people driving on the road because especially this is another site that was used by the Crown of Game of Thrones as a setting for some of their shots. So people would flock here, and eventually it got too much for the trees, and people would be driving too close, and they'd be uprooting some or exposing some of the roots and stuff, and carving their initials in the trunks, just vandalizing them. So they banned vehicles from being on this road.
okay,
So again, you have the picture, the dark hedges on the right. And then on the left, you can see that's what the leaves of the Figa sylvatica, the European beech tree look like. They're much wider and shorter than the beech trees that we have over in Ontario, which have very linear lanceolate leaves and much more pronounced margins on them than these. But they're, and then if you've been in St. John's, you've seen the big copper beech trees up on what's the main road going up from
Barring Park.
no, the main road that goes up from Torbay Road up. What do they call that? I've forgotten the name of it. There was this
Canaz Hill.
maybe,
Kings
yeah.
Road, Kings Road.
That's it, yeah.
Okay,
So they have big copper beech on some of the properties there. So this is the same species, it's just the typical green variety of the leaf.
okay,
So now we're headed out. We're going back down to Belfast, and just put this picture in to show you the Pinus sylvestris growing along the sides of the road. These are Scots pine. And for a while, the Scots pine disappeared from Ireland, but they reintroduced it. So now it's definitely around, and it's planted as a plantation tree too, used in forestry.
okay.
And that's it. Thank you for watching.
And by the way, that was Kingsbridge Road, really.
Okay.
I was wrong. Love the black-faced sheep.
Yeah, aren't they gorgeous?
It's sweet. Yes. Well, wow. We've had a journey, Sue. We've really had quite the trip. Every photo was gorgeous.
Thanks.
And you
It
know,
was an amazing
personally,
trip.
I don't know if other people have questions, please come on if you do, but I'd like to say how I appreciate having things so identified. And I love hearing you say the proper pronunciation of the botanical names, because when I read them in books, I say them the wrong way in my head. So I love hearing the proper pronunciation of all these beautiful plants. Yeah, they're great. Thank you so much. Does anyone have
You're
any
more than welcome.
questions or comments here tonight?
Should I stop sharing on this?
Yeah.
Should I
Okay,
hit
we'll
stop sharing?
stop. Yeah, sure. You can stop
Okay.
sharing. That okay.
Yeah, okay.
That's great.
Sue, I gotta say your images were stunning and everything looked so green.
It is. It's unbelievable. You can't believe it's so green when you get
Yeah.
there.
When we were in Dublin, it has a tropical climate though, because I remember being in Dublin, I've seen palm trees.
Probably in the city, yeah. We
Yeah.
didn't see any in the areas where we were, but we only spent a day in Dublin. And we did go to did you go to Phoenix Park when you were there?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
we went
beautiful.
there too. Did you see the zoo?
No, we didn't.
Oh, we went in the zoo and every plant is labeled,
Wow.
which almost, I mean, some of you can't really get to the labels, but the label is there, so That's what I found so stunning about that park. So the next talk I give later on in the year will include some pictures from there and Belfast Botanic Garden.
I got to tell you that we took a coach to the Cliffs of Moher in Galway, and
Oh, yeah.
it was mostly young people. They seemed to be Middle Eastern, but Bill and I were right up in the front. And the guy was talking to Bill a lot. He had been here in Newfoundland. He dated a Newfoundlander, and he was talking about George Street and everything. And so he said, "Oh, you love the scenery." And Bill said, "My wife loves flowers." And he says, "Oh, I got a surprise for you." I didn't even know anything about the Burren at the time. And he pulled over. There wasn't much place, like you say, to turn over. And he said to everyone, "Out, we're going looking at wildflowers." And everybody else, but it was November. So when we got out,
Whoa, too bad.
and it was really treacherous climbing around. Like, I was amazed. And
Yeah.
the only thing I remember seeing, everything is gone by then. It seemed like the fall crocus. That's all I thought I could recognize.
Wow.
There wasn't much there. But anyway, and everybody was basically waiting at the bus. When are we going to get aboard and get going? And anyway, he was taking the numbers of making sure everybody was aboard the bus. And he says, "I got to tell you something about these two people here, right?" And I was like, "What is he going to say?" And he said, "You think that we drink in Ireland? No, where they come from, they know how to drink." And I was mortified.
Oh my.
Thank you. The images were beautiful. Thank you.
You probably didn't know that a lot of people on George Street are visitors, not locals
Yes,
too.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah, but
Thank you.
they're changing the formula for screech. Apparently, in Jamaica they can't get some of the ingredients, and they're rebranding it as some kind of new screech or golden screech or something. But they
Oh.
no more old
Oh
screech.
dear.
They've lost their
No.
supplier forever.
I'm sorry about the Bateman here. It's really funny on that one.
I bet
Sorry.
Lois is too.
I can't wait for your next show. It's really lovely.
Yeah. Things are
Thank
so
you, Sue. It was
gorgeous.
fabulous. I quite enjoyed it. And it's good to see
Thank
you.
you.
Good to
Yeah,
see you.
you too. Hard to see you with the light in the backyard.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how to do lighting for Zoom. Sorry.
It's okay.
Just an overhead light.
Yeah.
Is there much red valerian around? Because that's stunning, isn't it?
Yeah, in the Doolin area, there certainly was. I don't think we saw it anywhere else around Doolin. So we didn't get any further south, which is kind of a shame because Bill's ancestors are from the more southern areas of Ireland, but they probably have it more down there. We basically left the locations to the guides, the tour company, and we thought they did a great job because everywhere we were just stunned by how beautiful everything was. And when we got to Belfast, I can remember thinking, "Oh, this looks terrible." They had this in the middle of the Belfast city, like a brick hotel. I thought, this is garbage. Then we found out that the Botanic Garden was across the street. So it was perfect, we just had to walk across one street and there we were.
Well. Can you hear me?
I can.
AirPods are dying. They go after a few hours. Yes. So that was really, really something, I've got to say. Everything was so interesting to see. Oh, look, there's Joan. Hi, Joan. Yeah, you're muted, Joan.
Hey, Katerina.
And Katerina, hi. Welcome.
She's our friend from the Ukraine.
Aha. Well,
Wow.
Hi.
I'm sure you have wildflowers there that would be wonderful as well. In the
So,
Ukraine.
Sue, so many of our plants have come from Ireland?
Very few.
Very
Very
few.
few. I was really surprised at how little similarity there was between the flora. A lot of them came over from Britain, but there's quite a difference between what's over in Britain and what's in Ireland too. So, I can put together a list for you later if you'd like, but yeah, I was surprised that there's very little similarity.
I mean, I must say it was pretty weird to see the limestone barrens or the Burren seem to look a lot like the Northern Peninsula, but only a few species the same.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
is that just because there's this huge ocean between us, or like it was some of it because of climate? Because I know that Ireland is a little warmer. They get the swing of the jet stream there, and
Well,
that's
it's definitely
not
warmer
the
in
jet stream,
Ireland, Gulf
the
Stream.
Gulf Stream.
Yeah, it's definitely warmer there, but Britain is not that different, you know. They may not get as much of an effect of the Gulf Stream. But I think what it was is that most of the boats that came over with ballast that brought our weeds were from Britain. They weren't from Ireland.
Okay.
So I think that's more the reason than anything else.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And when the people from Ireland did come over, it was well past the time when everything here was pretty well established. I don't know how many generations Bill's family's been in Newfoundland, but at least 4 or 5.
Yeah.
So, you know, when the Irish started immigrating, I don't really know. But they would have come over as poor immigrants, you know, looking for a place to survive. They wouldn't have been bringing plants with them. So
Sue, this was absolutely wonderful. I enjoyed it immensely. This is Heather.
I'm glad.
Yes, and I have one question. A lot of people while we were watching might have been thinking, was there a speed limit on the roads?
There was, I can't remember. I
No?
think I had one picture of a speed limit, 50 or 60 kilometers on but I just don't remember. We tried, I know Bill tried to stick, he did all the driving. Bill might be able to answer this. If he remembers if he had to stick to the road or not. But I mean, if he had trouble sticking to the speed limit. But you know, when you're in the outer areas, there wasn't that much traffic. And you know, we were looking at everything too, so we were taking our time. We weren't speeding along like some people are doing when they're just trying to get from one destination to another. Everything was new and interesting to us, so we didn't have any trouble driving below the speed limit or at it.
Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't have some areas cleared, you know, that you could stop off or move off.
Yeah, I was really
off the
surprised.
road. Yeah.
We found one side road in a bog that we decided to turn off into, and we went until there was a gate that we couldn't go any further, and then we wanted to see what was growing on the riverbank, and turns out there were already 3 people there, and they were quite surprised to see strangers coming on their property. So, you know, almost everything is owned by someone, so it's you know, it's not like in Newfoundland and in Northern Ontario, we have the same kind of thing. You have a lot of Crown land, and no one minds if you'd walk on Crown land, but it's not that way in Ireland. You really have to know where you can walk. And like Brendan, he brought us to an area of the Burren that was privately owned, but he knew it would have interesting plants for us. But if we would never have found it if he hadn't brought us there. But still, you know, there were lots of places you could see things, and just very few places you could pull off the road. So that was the only thing that I was disappointed about. You know, you couldn't really get out and look around wherever you wanted. You had
No,
to
if
have a
you saw a
destination.
flower, you wouldn't be able to, right? You had to go on.
Yeah, and if you know, if you're lucky to have a nice B&B that was within walking distance of a place, then you could just leave your car at the B&B and walk somewhere. But you know, it's not like here where we just pull off the side of the road anywhere we want, you know, and there's a big shoulder, you can get out and take pictures or whatever. So, but I wouldn't recommend driving there if you've never driven on the left side of the road. Get the tour with the driver to do it for you.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Hi, Sue. This is Tim here from the Botanical Garden. I'm not sure if we did meet once up actually on the Limestone Barrens up at I think
Yes,
I
and
think
then
it was
at the
at Burn
Botanic
Cape.
Garden too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Yeah, fantastic presentation. I was struck by a couple of things. One was the amount of limestone in Ireland.
Yeah,
We have such little outcrops of it here, and how, as John already said, how familiar it looks, how familiar the stones are in the way that they're formed and the way they're eroded. It leaves those wonderful cracks and a great place to botanize, because you're not sure what you're going to find living down in those cracks in those little shady areas. So it was fantastic, but also how, and you already talked about it, just how little natural space there is. Like, it seems like every part of the land was disturbed at one point or another, that it's all farmland and it's all private. And it kind of struck me in how blessed we are to kind of have all the wild spaces that we have in our province to safely get out and roam around and not have to worry about being on private property.
When I got unrestricted.
Yeah. So anyways, fantastic. And
Thanks.
as already been said, your photography was great, and
Thanks.
it was really nice to see. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All the stone walls, it seems like goes on and on. Were they all
do.
holding cattle, or, you know, was that cattle?
It could be cattle. I can't imagine some of these walls were surrounding arable land. Next time there were so many pictures of the flowers that I had hard time putting in pictures of the scenery. But next time I'll put in a few of the scenery further north where you can see the hills with all the, the road, the rock walls there. Because on the flats, you can't see the extent of the walls as much. But they they climbed everywhere. I don't think they were in the mountain range. I think that area was off limits. But we didn't really go in there, so I couldn't tell you that. But that would be a nice area to see. If I went back again, I definitely want to go to the Burren again, and I would definitely want to go to that estate with the ivy growing on it, because that area was just gorgeous. So the only bad thing that happened out there is we were in that forested area by Cavangarden. Bill got a tick on him. And unfortunately, it was a benign tick. I had some tweezers with me, so I was able to pull it off the day after he found it, or the day he found it. But and then he had it. We saved it, and he got it tested, and it was fine. It wasn't a disease tick. But they were in those forests, So I don't know. I would want to go in the forests again.
And Carol mentioned the walls. That the rocks are just spectacular. But what was one of the walls you showed, you could see right through it, and I'm thinking that would never last here because of all of our frost heave, right? So that would have toppled long
That's what
ago.
I was
here.
thinking. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, they don't. I guess they don't have much frost over there.
Yeah. So the walls would last. Obviously, they've lasted for centuries over there. So, but that one with the clear, obvious spaces between the stones, you could see right through it. It's just amazing that still stands up. But that's probably the reason why.
And it was so neatly put together too. I couldn't get it back.
Well, the Newfoundland equivalent of all of those rock walls, I suppose, is Greats Cove.
Greats Cove.
Greats Cove. We had a field trip out there one time, and from the top of the hill, it's quite a spectacular sight. I was told that they were to keep farm animals and stuff out, so that they could put crops inside of them, as opposed to putting the farm animals in them. So it was sort of like, okay, put all your stuff inside the walls, and hopefully they won't climb over and eat them.
probably.
Well, they didn't have much wood to cut to make wood fences, so I guess they had an abundance of rock, so they were able to make rock walls around things instead.
No trees at Greats Cove.
No.
Are there many of those walls, those rock walls, I wonder, along the southern shore? As you go, because that's where a lot of the Irish people went.
Oddly, there aren't. I'm from the southern shore, and there are very few stone walls there, and it always surprised me how that really didn't come over with all the people who settled. They seem to. I guess maybe when they left Ireland, building out of stone is not an easy task. Building out of wood is a whole lot easier. And I guess when they got here, they found wood, and the wood was likely all gone from their homeland, and so they just switched over to making wooden buildings instead of stone buildings. Even in St. John's, there aren't really that many stone buildings, considering all the houses that are here. It's only in the super older parts of town you'll find stone buildings. Stone was used a lot for foundations, for to build enough of a foundation to build a house on, but that was only just a few feet, right?
On the East Coast Trail by Blackhead, there's really cool stone walls, and there's quite a few there. But they just sort of like, one is right down by the ocean near Cantwell's Cove, but then the other one is right down, actually, as you head from Blackhead to Cape Spear, just right in the middle of nowhere, which I always thought was sort of interesting, but not very high, low.
There is a stone wall in the middle of the woods behind the Botanical Garden Nursery, and it was built by the O'Briens.
Yeah.
And it's one of those kind of rubble walls where it's not necessarily a straight-sided wall on both sides. It was more just a kind of a wall with smaller rubble thrown in the middle of the larger stones on the outside. And it's certainly crumbling. There's trees growing up in the middle of it, which are helping it fall down. But they would have built that, I guess, when they were clearing that land for farming way back when.
Well, a lot of the walls, so-called in Newfoundland, in areas where there's some agriculture, were just simply people trying to get the rocks out of their potato fields, and they were just piling them along the edge, so they had to put them somewhere. And years of pulling up rocks and putting them on the side of the field has sort of made what kind of is walls.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And there's some lovely rock houses and stone rock houses in Brigus.
Yes.
Yes, that's right. There are.
Yeah. And they have the walls there too, I think.
Yeah, they do. There's a lot of rock walls in Brigus, and they're doing a lot of it now new.
Oh, are they?
A lot of the fencing is brand new rock, but based on the old tradition. Yeah, it's made to look old.
Oh, interesting.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Well, all I can say is thank you so much, Sue. It's really great. Really a lovely presentation.
Thank you, Sue.
So it was fabulous. It was fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Say good night, everybody, and hope
Good
to
night.
see you.
Good night,
everybody.
Good night.
Yeah. Mhm.
All right.